Alright, so I thought I'd do a second video for this Develop It because I fixed two of the issues that I was having, and I thought I'd just follow up and show you what that ended up being in case you run into it. So over here, one of the issues, matter of fact, let me just show you the output. So here's the current state of the app. So you can see that I figured out a way to make those buttons the same size as the input fields. I found the solution out on MDN, but just to show you the CSS that I did for that was I ended up on the button adding some border box sizing, width of 100, and that made that span out. Okay, so that's there. And then I also figured out just the required thing. And this is good, and understand that when I gave you guys the very first video on Firebase, what they did, they set up the event listener on the button. And so that's why I was changing my login handler to listen for or fire the event listener on here. And the more I played with it and the more I realized what was happening is that I wanted the functionality of the required field, and in order to do that I had to add a form. So I ended up, and I'll show you this, changing my index file here to then include the form, and then have that global variable that was set up as a selector. And when I did that, I set that up, but my code was still targeted to listening for the button versus listening for the form, because that would capture on the submit, and by way of implementing the required, then that works because you're submitting the form in the way that the requires, not to play on words there. Okay, so that was good. That was good to walk through and realize why that was happening. So this still, which is great, works well. I have added a couple things. I've added a font because I thought that'd be fun to play with. So if you haven't done that, definitely check out fonts, google.fonts.com. I think that's the right URL. No, actually it's google.com. It's really great to look through all. Dang, and I really tried to find one that I felt would represent, from the user what I was going for, and this seemed to be kind of playful. So I spent a bit of time doing that, and I think it really, just that one change does enhance your UI really nicely. So think about that. It's very easy if you haven't done it. Just hit plus, come down to here, and then you can add this into your index, and then this is how you would reference it in your CSS. Do be careful though, adding more than one of these can cause page bloat, so I wouldn't add more than 2 if I was you, but it also will tell you load time here, which is nice on that particular one I chose for this example. Okay, so the other thing I ended up doing here, and I don't think this was necessarily, so that was the big thing right there, is changing that. The other thing I've done here when I log in, and I'll show you this because I'm now heading into the place now. So this is going to be where I have some user specific message, right? Welcome back, and then the username, and I've just put this in here to indicate that's where it will go. And then here are your previous gameplays. So right now I have this coming to just a section where that gameplay was. But I'm going to drop, my goal right now is to drop this out for here, and then have a start game button that then loads up that starts a timer and does stuff like that. So my next steps right now are to hook up to where let me just go back here, when the user logs in, okay, or when the user creates, right, when you create it, because I'm grabbing that first name and last name, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to modify this to, because right now I'm not doing anything with the data, and I'm going to add that into the database for Firebase. And here's what I mean by that. So this is a foreshadowing of my next step, okay? And I believe I said a little about this last time, but I'll just end with this here. Is on my project, I have authentication working. I got 2 users. So now my next step is actually to get started with the real-time database, okay? So now what I'm going to do is when that user logs in, I'm going to create I'm going to add to my real-time database a folder concept, but it's really in the JSON file, right? A key value pair that represents that logged in user, and then also sets up the structure for me to record in gameplay. But for now, I'll just be adding that structure into the database. So that's when you see my next video, that's what I'm going to have accomplished, which is that, okay? Which is to do that piece of it, which would allow me to do, so once I get that user and then I'll present that data back to them, right, and then maybe make up some historical gameplay data so I can see what that would look like. Drop this out for now, have a, add a new event listener for the start game, and then actually at that point figure out how I'm gonna handle the gameplay. Okay, so I just wanted to give you that update because when I left this video, and I forgot to load this up on Sunday, but I suspect nobody's even thought this far. Maybe you have, because actually today, which is in this case the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I'll be grading today. So that's where I'm going to take a look at what you submitted for the Develop It, and now I have released for the next Develop It. So I really only have 2 left to do. Right here, sorry, I didn't plug that. So I've done this one. So I told you I was thinking about what I was going to do for here. But thinking about it more, I may actually have you look at the promises chapter at the end, because I think that's going to be valuable. And I'll tell you why is that I actually use promises here because it's the way that when the video that we watched, and you could do a callback here, but it's basically saying, right, capture, so set up a promise, run the authentication, and then depending on what happens on the promise, right, you can then log messages to the console. But this is also where I will use this to capture some of these error messages to give user feedback when I work on the next Develop It, which really is the validation, the user validation. Okay? All right, so I just wanted to give you the second one. And just show you how I fixed the couple things that I was running into. Have a good one.